Hello world, today's subject is Welt, everyone's favorite and only imaginary unit in the game so far. Welt is all about creating an advantage and pressing this advantage as much as you can. He achieves this easily by having plenty of slows and imprisonments in his kit. Not only that, but he's amazing at breaking toughness bars and also deals a surprising amount of damage. Without further ado, let's go over his skills. His basic attack deals imaginary damage to the target enemy and of course recovers one skill point. His skill deals imaginary damage to an enemy and then bounces at random 2 more times, dealing the same amount of damage. It also has the chance to slow enemies hit by 10% for 2 turns. His ultimate deals massive imaginary damage to all enemies and is guaranteed to imprison enemies hit for 1 turn. Imprisoned enemies have their actions delayed and are slowed by a further 10%. I believe this can stack with the skill's slow for a total of 20% slow. All of this pairs very nicely with his talent, which makes him deal even more imaginary damage to slowed enemies. Also, try not to use his ultimate to break the enemy's toughness bars, because imaginary weakness breaks already imprison enemies. You might be missing out on another instance of imprisonment. His technique summons an area that slows enemies in the open world, not in battle. What you do get in battle, however, is a 100% chance to imprison all enemies that were affected by this area. Moving on, let's take a look at every single Nihility light cone available so far. At the very top spot, and to nobody's surprise, we have his signature light cone in the name of the world. Being 5-star, not only does it provide outstanding stats, but its passive is also very powerful, increasing the wearer's damage to debuffed enemies by 24%. Additionally, whenever you use your skill, it has an extra 18% effect hit rate, all the while increasing your attack by 24%. You can get this light cone from warping into Light Cone Event Warp or the regular warp, as well as in the Starlight Exchange section of the store for 600 starlights. These starlights are acquired by summoning 4-star and 5-star light cones and duplicate characters. Up next is Loop, a 3-star light cone. This light cone increases damage dealt by its wearer to slowed enemies. At Superimposition 1, this is a measly 24%. However, with it being 3-star, it should be pretty easy to get to Superimposition 5, at which point it deals 48% damage. Now the reason why this one is so good is because this extra damage also affects his talent, given that it's a different instance of damage. From now on, the light cones showcased earn their respective tiers, not because they're bad, just because they don't exactly do anything special for Welt. With that said, let's go over the good tier quickly. Resolution shines as Pearls of Sweat, gives a 60% chance to win their enemies, which just means that they have their defense lowered by 12% for 1 turn. You can even consider this a team-wide buff, but at lower superimposition levels, the lower defense doesn't equal the damage you deal with other light cones. Good Night and Sleep Well makes it so that for every debuff the target enemy has, the damage dealt by the wearer increases by 12%, stacking up to 3 times. This one is good, but Welt can hardly stack this by himself, and even with the help of teammates, the damage increase comes up to a total of 36%, nowhere near the 48% that Loop provides as a 3-star light cone. It should be noted that at higher superimposition levels, this would surpass Loop, but it's also rarer, thus harder to superimpose. We Will Meet Again has a passive that deals additional damage equal to 48% of the wearer's attack to a random enemy that has been attacked after using your basic attack or skill. And not only do you have to pay to obtain it, there's also better light cones you can pick in the battle pass. Hidden Shadow makes your basic attack deal additional damage to the target enemy after using your skill. At higher superimposition levels, this attack scaling becomes absurd at a whopping 120% at superimposition 5. However, it only affects your basic attack. In the mediocre tier, we have Void, which increases your effect hit rate for 3 turns at the start of the battle. At Superimposition 5, this gives you an extra 40% hit rate, but effect hit rate can be obtained from Relics as well, and his kit already has enough to guarantee you will slow enemies, so it's unnecessary. And finally, at the poor tier, Eyes of the Prey increases hit rate by 20%, once again unnecessary, and also increases damage over time, which Welt does not possess in his kit. Fermata increases break effect by 16%, which isn't terrible, but you can get this from not only relics but also relic sets, and increases the wearer's damage to enemies affected by shock or wind shear, also applying to damage over time. Not only have we established that Welt doesn't have any damage over time, but he also has no way of applying shock or wind shear. As for traces, your priority should be leveling your skill to increase your chances of slowing enemies, then your ultimate, and finally, your talent. Don't spend any resources on his basic attack unless you have the luxury to do so. However, do try to unlock Retribution, which makes the enemies affected by your ultimate take 12% more damage for 2 turns. When it comes to relics, there's actually 2 sets you can take on him. You can go for Wastelander of Banditry Desert, which has the 2-piece bonus of increasing imaginary damage by 10%, and at 4-piece, it increases the wearer's crit rate towards debuffed enemies by 10% and increases crit damage by 20% against imprisoned enemies. This set has 2 problems though. Firstly, the only thing this set provides is a little bit of extra damage and a minuscule amount of crit bonus, which of course are good on Welt, but there's better stats you can focus on. Second, you'll have to spend a lot of time and resources farming good rolls on this one, which brings me to my next set. Thief of Shooting Meteor. The 32% break effect is absolutely succulent, considering how good of a breaker Welt is, and also recovers energy whenever you inflict a weakness break on an enemy. And considering how valuable Welt's ultimate is, this of course benefits him greatly. As for the planar ornaments, Pangalactic Commercial Enterprise is a great choice if you feel like you need more effect hit rate, and if you already have some to make the most out of the attack bonus. I decided to go for Talia Kingdom of Banditry to further increase my break effect to absurd amounts. The reason why break effect is so valuable on Welt is because it increases how much the enemy actions are delayed after breaking their toughness bar, something that imaginary weakness breaks have by default, but that can be boosted further, as well as the slow provided by imaginary breaks, all the while dealing a ton of damage of course. With that out of the way, let's quickly go over his Eidolons. His first Eidolon makes it so that his next 2 attacks after using his ultimate are enhanced, dealing additional damage to the target. Second Eidolon regenerates 3 energy whenever you trigger his talent, so essentially whenever you attack slowed enemies. Third Eidolon increases his skill and basic attack levels, and by consequence their maximum level, by 2 and 1 respectively. Fourth Eidolon increases his skill's base damage to slow by 35%, giving him 100% chance even at level 1 trace. Fifth Eidolon raises his ultimate and talent levels, and again their maximum, by 2 levels. And his 6th Eidolon gives him an extra bounce on his skill, making it deal damage 4 times instead of 3. And now, let's take a look at who pairs nicely with Welt. For starters, Asta is an amazing unit that boosts your whole team's attack, and she becomes even stronger when paired with Welt. This is due to her ultimate increasing the speed of your whole team, which of course synergizes with Welt's slow, making sure your actions take place much faster than the enemies, as well as her tremendous ability to weakness break enemies weak to fire. This is due to her skill bouncing between enemies, much like Welt's. As for your main DPS, Seele is already able to give herself more actions with her resurgence. This becomes even stronger when you consider that it's very likely you'll be attacking more than once in a single cycle. Heng is also a very solid pick, given that his ultimate deals much more damage if the target enemy is slowed, which Welt can provide not only easily but also consistently. And although other units like Yanqing might not exactly have synergy with Welt, they're still going to work just fine. Trust me, most sub DPS and support units are absolutely broken so far. And for the last slot, a unit that can give you survivability is preferred, Natasha and Bailu being the top picks as healers, but Japart, March, and the Fire Trailblazer should also cover up this spot nicely. If you're willing to exchange this survivability for damage, you can also take Tingyun to buff your units even more and recover energy to make your cycles even longer. Maybe even Pella to make sure that the enemy loses even more hope by dispelling their buffs and decreasing their defense. And of course Bronya, whom I do not have the privilege of owning, to give you even more actions during your cycle, as well as buffing your team. In conclusion, Welt is a great flex unit in general. You could even make Sampo work with him. Of course, no offense to any Sampo mains that might be watching. I'm sure all 4 of you are wonderful people. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this guide. Thank you very much for watching and for the support in my last video, which was just absolutely unbelievable. Quick shout out to K and to JMoney4521 for requesting this guide. Also, if you have any requests or suggestions, do leave them in the comments below. I read every single one of them. I'd appreciate it if you liked the video, and remember to subscribe if you don't want to miss any other guides or videos I might make in the future. Good luck in your polls and take it easy.